So as long as I can do art and people are recognizing it and responding to it, and I feel good about what's coming out, it's gonna keep going.
Ghost Cult Magazine welcomes in Greg Schwan of Witnesses. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing really well. Thanks a lot for having me here. I can't wait to get into it.
It is a pleasure to talk to you. We've followed each other for many years. I've followed your career. You have supported Ghost Cult, and I'm very thankful for anybody that watches this shenanigans that we do and, helps us get the word out. I often say that a music website is just like a band. It's a, it's usually a DIY project with a few partners, and it's a labor of love. There's a handful of people out there doing what we do. I still have that ethos from when I had my many mediocre New York City bands. Although I got in trouble for that. Somebody texted me recently. He was like, "Dude, what the hell?" I was like, "Not your band, my band." They're like, "No, you said bands." So the bands that I led were, yeah, all right, pretty good. And then somebody else's band was great that I joined. So like,
All right.
you got to be careful when you disparage yourself and be self-depreciating. But yeah, man, it's been a long time coming, and we're chatting on the occasion of the Four album. You put out two albums in the middle of, you wrote and recorded two albums in the midst of this craziness with a lot of collaborators, but mostly this is your brainchild. This is, you are the author of all this great, incredible stuff. And, just right off the bat, like in this midst of this craziness, and I do hope you're well and your family is well right now, but like, in the midst of all this, how did you even find, some people were like just catatonic. They couldn't function because of the fear and the stress of everything. But like you managed to find like a creative well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And the first things first, I'm fortunate, right? I mean, there are people whose livelihoods were deeply affected and are deeply affected and will continue to be deeply affected for a long time by virtue of what's going on and what continues to go on. But so on that, I was my material needs were met. So I didn't have any risk there. Professionally, I'm able to work from home. My spouse also. So I mean, with that, creatively, I don't know. It's a carryover. The pandemic hasn't really slowed me down at all. I was joking with another music writer who said, "How do you keep releasing so much stuff?" And I said, all I can say is that since I started this project in around 2015, 16, I've just had a burst of creativity that I don't know if it was pent up. I don't really know, but I'm just going to be greedy, right? I mean, you could say to yourself, "Ooh, I should space my releases out." Who gives a shit, man? I'm not on any label. I don't have any obligations. There's no touring cycle. So as long as I can do art and people are recognizing it and responding to it, and I feel good about what's coming out, it's gonna keep going.
Word. I like the positivity. There's another, you're in Queens, New York. I am a former resident of Brooklyn and a previous lifetime New Yorker mostly. I was interviewing another New York City artist a few months back about their multitude of releases, same kind of thing. I think this guy did a series of singles and a full album,
Okay.
maybe even an EP or two, wrote and produced for other people, like just work. And he was like, "I'm an introvert. So this was the greatest gift ever. I didn't have to go out. I didn't have to commute. I
Yep.
didn't have to go, turn people down for dinners I didn't want to go to, and he's a pretty to see him on stage or hear his music and think he's a very social, outgoing front person type of person.
Yes.
But he was like, "I'm really introverted deep down." And I love the pandemic because all I did was just shut the windows, go out for food and coffee, and maybe see people gently and then just work on music.
That resonates.
Yeah,
I'm also an introvert, and I think introversion is sometimes confused for shyness, but it's not shyness.
no,
It has to do with just your energy, right? And what you get energy from, and what saps your energy. And yeah, that resonates completely.
yeah,
Um,
there's a great book by the author and public speaker, became a public speaker somehow, Susan Cain. You're gonna look her up. She's like, "Oh, introversion, like it's totally misunderstood, introverts," and how she turned it into her superpower, which is incredible. I got to hear her speech. She's like, "You would
cool.
not know this, but normally I'm terrified of this stuff." I was like, "I
Tell me
wouldn't,"
about
because
it.
she commanded like a room of 5,000 people.
Yep. And I mean, that's kind of the beauty of wearing a mask. You don't have to smile at people, etc. You can just kind of, yeah, just kind of moving ahead.
Right, all these social cues.
Yeah,
Although we do lose some of the interpersonal communication,
for
and
sure.
I do find that like texting and internet messenger and stuff like that, things like sarcasm don't really cross
Oh,
over. And a lot of people are because we're all stressed out, a lot of people are very hypersensitive. They
yep.
can't take a joke anymore. So I'm
It's
gentle.
yep.
I'm a ball buster, but I try to be gentle. I know that I'm not everybody's cup of tea, man.
No, I get it. I
Um,
get it.
so let's draw it back for a second, and just outside of the last couple of years and these releases, how did you get started in music, and how did you start this project? Because I'm really curious about how this kind of, were you in bands before this? Because this is a
Yeah.
very centrist kind of soul thing, even though you always have peers and partners come in and collab. I do feel like this is your vision.
I mean, I like the term you used, altura before, because in film, that's like a, no pun intended, but a very cultish thing, the alter theory in this mastermind, right? I wouldn't put myself on that pedestal, but there is something to it. It's pretty cool. But look, I'm getting old, and I was playing. My first doom death band was in my late teens, early 20s. It was a lot of fun. We had a couple demos, and if you go to Metal Archives, you can trace all that bullshit. And then I went through a period in my mid to late 20s where I didn't play. I sold all my gear. I was like, whatever, just going on to a different phase of my life. Wasn't motivated. And then around maybe at 2011, 2012, I said there were some things that kind of triggered me to want to be creative again. And so I went out, and it had been a long time, and I bought like the most playable Ibanez guitar you can imagine. Just like, give me something if I'm rusty that's like fast as hell. Not that I play fast music, but just give me the easiest to play guitar you can possibly imagine. So I go out and get this Ibanez, and I start writing again. And then in 2015 or so, I decided I wanted to do doom metal again. And I realize people say what I'm doing is like alt or some shit, but it's doom metal to me. I know what my influences are and whatnot. And so I start this, and originally, believe it or not, like I tested it out with like harsh vocals. And because that's what I had done when I was a kid. And it just no criticism of the person who was doing them. I was just like, no, this isn't what I want to do. The singer I was working with was freaking awesome, but I was like, no, this is not where I want to go creatively right now. At the same time, finding a clean singer was, I just wasn't having any luck. I had a very specific thing in mind, like, I didn't want to do something that sounded like Messiah or ICS Vortex. I had this very different, vision for what I wanted to do, and I couldn't find anyone. And so with that, I said, well, shit, I'm not just a metalhead. I listen to all kinds of stuff. So why don't I indulge? Why don't I just break out of this for a second and try to do something else? And so then I did 1 and 2, and those happened pretty quickly. It was like very experimental, trying new stuff, trying to learn how to record, how to mix, blah blah blah. And then that kind of voice came back. I was like, doom metal, and I was like, yeah, I got. Don't forget the doom metal. And I was like, yeah, what the hell, man? I still have a score. I said this to someone the other day. I had a score to settle with it. And then I wrote To Disappear Into Be Nothing. It was very natural. I found a singer who I thought it worked. And then I did a single after that, then Doom 2. And there's other stuff happening in parallel. But then Doom 2 kind of came out, and I think that got the most attention so far. That seemed to resonate with people. I mean, it was weird, right? I had written these lyrics about a plague, and then before COVID, and then they came out like a few months into COVID, and it was like, what the hell, man? You see like Nostradamus or something, which is dumb luck. Luck in quotes. It was just, it was just a weird coincidence. And yeah, and so I think with that I started to get more confidence, both, and then because I also did 3 around that time, and I was starting to like find my groove, if you want to call it that. Then I even experimented with Poltergeist 1, which is like sparse acoustics and female vocals, and it's really, really dark and personal. So kind of a convoluted version. But the short version is that I had given up music for a long time, and then it kind of came back. And I was like, no, you have to do this. And then through just a weird series of events, I ended up doing not metal, then coming back to metal, and then at some point just saying, you know what? Who the hell cares, man? Life is too short for me to worry about putting this project into a box. I've thought many times about, oh, should I split it out? Should I put the so-called like ambient stuff under just the name Greg Schwann? What do I do? And I have my moments where I'm like, yeah, I'll split it out. But then I'm like, man, I don't want to manage like 3 Twitter accounts. So I'm just sticking with it for now.
I dig it. Thank you for that. Very good recap. Yeah, like genre tags are for writers, less so than fans. Fans will tell you what they think of you. I do get that atmospheric doom thing. I think some of the more chill stuff reminded me of like Zaster, or even a band that's not really well known anymore, but US Christmas or USX was a huge band like 10 plus years ago. Appalachian dark folk Americana, but also metal. And also like peers with Sabrosa, where they had a violinist that played electric violin for guitar parts, like the more what you would anticipate typical guitar was done by a violinist, and theremin and lap steel and banjo, but also like, so Panopticon, disaster, black metal, folk rock, weirdness, but great and put together really well. Look up US Christmas, everybody.
I will for sure. You're giving me some homework right there.
Yeah, Nate Hall, he's on Facebook. He's a wonderful person. But yeah, and also what I also hear in the more recent stuff is this, like, even though it's not quite apples to apples, I think about Tribes of New Rot, which was the offshoot of Neurosis when they were doing the ambient, atmospheric, acoustic, but with other, it's not really keyboards, but just like, or oral ear candy, like little sonic landscapes and things. And your one word you do have on your Bandcamp that I love is cinematic. And I think anybody listening to these last couple of releases, you're getting into this really beautiful composing, these like broad emotional pieces. It's very lengthy pieces. You're not concerned with just like, here's the piece of music and just take it in. I don't really listen to these as tracks. I take them as a whole album.
Yes.
I think that's what you intended, I think.
I mean, you've hit on a lot of good points. Neurosis is very influential on me because this is so. Look, I realize there are people who are like Souls at Zero, and that's all that matters. And I love Souls at Zero, and I love, what's the one after that? Has the statue guy on the cover, or maybe some like from Pompeii or something.
Yep.
I Enemy of the Sun, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah, I had that on vinyl. So anyway, like I love that era, but then, I was late in high school when Through Silver and Blood came out, and that album just changed everything. And was, I think Steve Albini produced it, maybe. Unbelievable sound, and I saw them live around that time. And to your point about the cinematic aspects, I think the guy's name is Noah. He's like pounding. I was like, wait, I met him and I was like, wait, what are you doing? And he's got like foot pedals that he's pounding on to make his sound effects and whatnot. And I think, they had Pete Incorporated doing visuals, and then Times of Grace comes out with the Tribes of Neurot thing that you could play at the same time. So, I mean, what a band, right? Like I've lost track of them a little bit, but there's a Lifetime Achievement Award for me with Neurosis, because talk about a band that started out as a hardcore band and then very quickly just said, all right, we're going to make a genre and it's going to be called Neurosis.
Basically invented post-metal. Isn't it weird that like Neurosis and like, let's say Matt Pike associated bands, Sleep, before Sleep, Asbestos Death, and then High on Fire came from Oakland, and they started as like very specific sounds that they really innovated or created, and then wildly divergent, especially in the case of Neurosis. Neurosis' last record is fantastic. It was a bit short for me, but I think they're trying to find ways to continue to keep a collaborative together as they go a little further apart geographically. But yeah, man, Tribes of New Rod is a real, I want to make sure people understand that was my point, was like, there's a real there's a real quality in this cinematic, atmospheric doom drone stuff, even
Yes.
droning a little. And that may be some of the people what they brought in, and that may be some of you. You'll enlighten us. But yeah, I think there's some really great. It's really great music to spend time with. I know that people are so used to being spoon fed this macaroni and cheese of Spotify all the time. This quick,
Yeah.
endorphin hits of these little blasts of whatever it is, whatever you
Yeah,
like,
sure.
riffs, double bass. If you like very triggery black metal and good, garbage can guitar sounds, whatever you like,
Yeah,
people
yeah.
are used to the availability of everything. And I think it's the pleasure that I've derived from any of these, people who are really like making their bones in the Bandcamp world is like making music for yourself, number one, making music to spend time with and really and let it envelop you, repeat listens, going back and finding a point and looping it for yourself, just like repeat,
Yes.
repeat, repeat, and especially if you buy from the artist on Bandcamp, you have the ability to replay those things, download it for yourself,
Yeah.
so I'm really enjoying that. And I'd say beside cinematic atmospheric doom metal, whatever this is, the only other thing I can compare this to in terms of the enjoyment factor is like a lot of synthwave I've been getting into that is not related to this at all, but just
No, I hear you.
my personal listening journey is that like my palette cleanser music like the last year has been just like whatever random awesome synthwave related stuff I can find, and then I go back to like the brutal horrible
Sure.
horrible
No,
feeling stuff.
no, I get it. Look, I mean, you know, I think for me, like when I think about the past year, it's like I've spent equal parts listening to Arvo Part and Napalm Death. Like I love that continuum, right? And everything in between. But I mean, you hit on so many points. It's almost difficult to figure out what to respond to. But cinematic, I mean, let's talk about cinematic for a second. 100%, right? Um, I feel that when you can combine multiple sensory experiences in one, you have something really powerful, right? Books are powerful, paintings are powerful. Music can be particularly powerful when paired with a moving image. And I haven't had the opportunity to do that much yet. I have one small, like 2-minute video you can see on YouTube. I can talk about if you're curious. But I think about when I think about something that moves me in particular more than the fastest, most technical drummer or whatever we listen to in extreme metal, is I think about something like the Sicario soundtrack. And Johan Johansson has this one piece called The Beast. And it's when they're crossing the border, going into, I don't know where they're going, maybe Juarez or something like that. And that tension created with what you're looking at and what you're hearing, to me, is an experience far above many other things. Don't get me wrong. Like, I like, for example, like I brought up a part, like, I listened to like Sabat Mata or something like that on its own, and it's unbelievable. But when you can bring in different things, or at least when you can prompt the listener to see, it sounds like psychedelic or something, but when you can get people on a journey where they're starting to visualize things happening through a combination of music and lyrics, I think it's extremely powerful. And I think for me that's not something I'm very able to do with extreme metal. With extreme metal, I'm more impressed by the energy and the technical ability, but a lot of times I lose something more that I think music is capable of. And I love extreme metal. I'm not slagging it off. But there's just a reason why I'm going in a different direction. And partially because I can't play that fast.
Necessity is the mother of
It is.
invention. It really is. And I'm glad you mentioned film composers. I was going to ask if you had any other favorites just right off the bat, because it seems like you might be a
I
film
do.
soundtrack nerd like me.
Oh man. I mean, I wouldn't, I'm limited. I have a little bit of a narrow, uh, I don't know. I'm a little appreciation. There's just a few people that bubble up to the top for me. Johan Johansson being one. Deutsche Grammophon put out these beautiful collections over the past 2 years. There's 2 volumes, has some unreleased stuff, and then like these smaller films he did, which I had never even heard of. The other big one I say for me right now is Ryuichi Sakamoto. He did The Revenant, and he did Rage, and I think I think his catalog is like Steve Roach level, like just tons of stuff. And so I take every chance I can to mention this. The 4 vinyl was mastered by the same guy who mastered the vinyl of the Revenant soundtrack. That was a coup. I mean, when I found that guy, he's in Jersey, and when I found him and he was available and I could afford him, done. I mean, it was the easiest decision I've ever made. So, I mean, look, as a kid, like I love stuff like Danny Elfman and whatever, and I love the playfulness of his scores, and I used to listen to like those old Batman soundtracks and whatnot. But I think at this point in my life, those two, Johansson and Sakamoto, like they really bubble up for me to, I don't know. I find the music so powerful.
Nice.
Yeah.
I feel like mastering is almost a forgotten art. I know along a certain timeline, listen, if you have like a punk rock band, you could get somebody pretty pedestrian to handle it for you.
Sure.
If you're trying to bring out like the essence of a very multi-layered, thick album that again requires a certain set of ears that you're trying to attract as an author and again the author, but also if you're a certain kind of fan, you want a very well mastered mixed record. And I think these things are a little, not out of fashion clearly, but just harder and harder to find like a good quality example.
Well, necessity. Let's go back to that. Like I've mastered my stuff that's come out on CD and digital, and I've made tons of mistakes, which is part of the learning process. But with this, I started researching mastering for vinyl, and I got scared shitless, and I was like, I'm not touching this. Like, nope, I have like no way to easily know how I'm doing. It takes a lot of skill, and so even going with Joe Lambert, it's still nerve wracking, right? Like I think mastering is a weird process because you're giving up control, at least partially. And I think any mastering engineer is going to want to have their, input. It's not like just, okay, tell me what knobs to turn. Otherwise, why would you hire the person? That'd be silly. But there was, I'm sure you're aware of delays in vinyl right now. And so this one wasn't that bad, but I didn't get my test presses for about 6 to 7 months. And man, I was so anxious to put that on and spin it. I was like, what if I don't like it? What if I'm unhappy? Oh my God, what have I done? And I would say instantly, right? And within about 1 to 2 seconds, I was like, success. This worked. And then just listening to the rest 45 minutes or whatever was just a joy. But I think you have nailed it. I think mastering is a lost art. I think, it's, I don't like this word, but the democratization of recording, the simplicity, the lowering of the barrier. I think is great in some regard, but I think at the same time, there are professionals out there who have spent their lives learning how to do this and can bring out something in your music that maybe you could. But, it's cool to work with people who know their shit.
Right on. Is this on 2 vinyl sides, this whole album? I know you have some shorter tracks on 4, but there's definitely more of them.
So 4 is like, right. So I made a decision there. So sometimes I string together a couple of like the vignettes into one larger piece. But on this, I really wanted to split it up. I don't know why. I can't remember. It's just maybe it was my mood at the time. I mean, you nailed it, right? Like it's meant to be listened to as a whole. It really is. And that goes for the metal stuff as well. The Collapse is meant to be listened to as a whole. But there's 20 tracks, which is a pain in the ass to deal with from the production side. But so it's 2 sides. So there's about 20 minutes a piece approximately. So it fit very, very well. And yeah, it's just one record. It's not a double LP, but yeah, it's just one nice record. It's white, looks beautiful. The layout is phenomenal. And yeah, it's out there now.
Killer. That's so great. I'm so happy for you. On a couple of notes about composing, I know you mentioned guitar. Is guitar your first instrument? Is that the instrument you go to first to compose, or do some things come to you sort of in a different fashion that, that need an expression on a keyboard or some other?
Yeah, great
medium?
question. That's such a great question. I remember reading something about how like Dan Svana like writes on bass or something. And it's funny because like if you go back to some of the like Edge of Sanity and Pandemonium, it grooves like crazy. So like, that kind of makes sense. But for me, guitar and keys, right? Like mostly. But keep in mind, right? Guitar, like, maybe sometimes I'm playing something, heavy, but other times I need to pick up my nylon string and write something with that, or my steel string. And then with keyboards, it's just infinite possibilities, right? So, maybe I'm doing a synth pad, maybe I'm doing a sampled dulcimer, maybe I'm doing piano. And I think I need that versatility, because I need to, I need, you can be, I can't remember who said this, but it resonated a lot with me. I can be triggered by a chord, a tone, a sound in the natural world. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to build around that. Right. But yes, to answer your question, guitar is my first instrument. But at the same time, keyboards, guitar, and electric versus acoustic, whatever, all things that motivate me to get started. I can't sing for a damn, so that never happens.
Right. That was my next question. I know Matt Kozar is a recurring collaborator for you at least the last few years.
Yes.
You've got some very notables though on some of these records, and even some people who maybe are not household names who are stellar performers. Your
Yes.
vocalist on Collapse. How did you get to work with some of these artists like Jorgen and Gabby, and just reach out to them? Did you just DM them or reach out to them? Or
Yeah. Power of the internet. There is the worst thing that can happen when you reach out to someone is they say no. And I just, each one's a little different. You mentioned Matt. I've known Matt for like 25 years. And like, I'm just like, hey, dude, I need some EBO. And then I have it in like a week. And I'm helping him with some of his stuff. He has like some kind of post rock and kind of post metal stuff that I'm helping him with as well. More from the production side. But still, we work on all kinds of stuff together. But I guess I'll go through quickly some of the players on 4. Um, so Jurgen, saxophone is actually one of the first instruments that I was ever exposed to. My brother played it when I was a kid, and so I always loved it. Some people find it irritating. I don't get that. Like, I love how nasty it is, right? There's a book about the saxophone called The Devil's Horn or something. I'm like, yeah, that's great. That's it. That just one page, Devil's Horn. Yes, I get it. So I wanted saxophone, and I was like, well, hey, there's this guy, and he's badass, and he does metal, and maybe like if I reach out to him, like he'll say yes. And he's everywhere. He does a ton of tracking for people, so it worked, man. It just I've hit him up so many times now. So yeah, he's available, man. Like if he thinks your stuff is cool, like he'll play, and he's very reasonable. And he's an awesome guy, like really cool to talk to. I mean, I think I've asked him to change one thing across all of our like work together. And it wasn't even like wrong. I was like, oh, dude, I was hoping for something epic here. And he's like, okay, no problem. Next day, crazy epic sax thing. Maria Malmo was like someone I didn't know. But I posted somewhere, maybe Twitter or Facebook, that I was looking for a Nordic singer because I wanted the sing-song equality of a Nordic language on 4. Because part of 4 is about Norway for personal reasons. And the label she is on, this guy, Nick, wrote me, was like, hey, I heard you're looking for, you're looking for a Nordic singer. And like, we have like a few on our label. And I was like, shit, man, I never expected anyone would reach out to me about this. And then I checked out her first album, We Come From the Stars. And I was like, wow, okay. This is a talented person. So we worked together on 4. This is another one where I was like, hey, can you translate these lyrics into Danish for me, and then just do whatever you think is right? And wow, I was speechless when I first heard it, because at first I was like, man, this is weird. But then I was like, yeah, this is weird. It's like, this is a way my brain does not work in terms of writing. And I was like, that is hard to find that is, what I mean is someone who works in a totally different way than you, approaches music and melody in a totally different way, but complements what you're doing. I was like, okay. Gabby on Lake, singer for Collapse, both found on the internet. Reach out to them. Bing bang boom. They both do session work. And yeah, that's a few of them. I think I don't know, I don't even remember anymore, but like everyone, it's been great. I mean, I love doing it this way because look, you hire the right people, you give them a space, something amazing will happen. Like, you don't write melodies for these people. That would be cheating them and yourself out of what they're capable of. All I ask for is veto power. Like, I just want to say, like, ooh, you know, like chill out a little bit, or like you do like like project a little bit more on that take, if even if that. But just, there's, and you talk about the pandemic, right? Like, people like were available. People weren't touring, right?
Home
So
studios built up, and Sweetwater made something like a 1,000,000,000% profit.
oh my God,
Those
I didn't even
bastards.
think of that. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's like, yeah, a lot of people invested in, a good microphone or a podcast mic or a lighting or a rig or a home studio, whatever. And you get a lot of that now. So that's amazing and very fortuitous for you, but also, says a lot about you that they want to work with you also. So you should take that as a compliment that it is. And Maria gave me like very Lindy Faye Hella of Wardruna vibes, or Caro Teague, who's on the new Amin Ra album, as a basically equal collaborator with them, like that same kind of haunting, ethereal, great sound. I just
Can
have
I interject one point?
oh yeah, please, this is yours.
The
It's your
first
interview.
time I saw Vardruna live, Lindy Faye rocked my world. I mean, obviously I knew the music, I knew the albums, but seeing her live, I was floored. And that's saying a lot because, Einar is such a strong presence. He's just cool. He's like, man, this guy, I don't know, like all the research he does, the work behind the music, and they just look cool on stage, right? And then Lindy Faye Hella starts singing, and I was like, okay, this is next level. So just wanted to remark.
Yeah, no, I feel like we were probably both at the same New York City show at Town Hall 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago exactly, actually.
Oh, so then did you go see Einar at Rough Trade?
I did.
You were there.
We were all there, yeah. So I
That's
like
awesome.
everybody, of course. And
Yep.
then he was also at when Enslaved was in town for their 25th anniversary the year before. He was also at Rough Trade with Enslaved, and I interviewed Enslaved there. I've interviewed Einar at Town Hall. I'm supposed to interview him again soon for their upcoming thing. Huge fan. And
he's awesome.
I definitely bought, I got fanboyed that day that he was at Rough Trade. I went to he did a seminar. I literally stalked him around the city for like 18 hours. Yep. And they were like, do you want to come to dinner with us? I was like, no.
How did you turn that down?
It's not that I turned it down, but I just, as a journalist, I don't want to inject myself too much into a personal situation. I've been out, believe me, I've had plenty of those. I just try not, it's not that I turned it down, but I just kind of was like, I don't want to be one more person trying to get your vie for your attention. You also worked all day, flew in, did 2 seminars, a musical performance, and then autographed like 1,000
oh my god
Snake Pit poetry books in vinyls, like I also have. So like I was like, I've showed up everywhere you are for a day. It's probably gonna get weird. But yeah, definitely agree on that and love them. And Hailung, and you're starting to see like a real growth of this, I don't know what genre to call it, but it's whatever genre it is. Just kind of for a last couple of things for you here. So we have 4, and now the Collapse, and now that it's kind of only Collapse came out on Halloween. What was the just in terms of inspiration between 4 and the Collapse, and now where you are going next? Where is your mindset at? Like, what's possible? Are you already planning the next release? Was there any changes between those? They are definitely distinctly different albums, the two, and I wonder what's next for you now.
Right. So let me try and answer that succinctly. So I think the Collapse, I just get greedy. I mean, Doom 2 and Witnesses 3 both boosted my confidence in what I was doing. Kind of feel like I was kind of feeling things out before finding my voice, I guess, if you want to call it that. And so I just had more material, and more things were coming, and more ideas were coming. And so I hate to say this, it sounds, I don't know. The Collapse is kind of like a sequel to Doom 2 in a way, right? It's furthering those thematically. It's somewhat similar. There's a feel that's kind of similar. It keeps that kind of rock element that goes along with it. And I want to come back to that in a second. But then with four was very particularly inspired by, I mentioned Norway, for example. My wife and I have been there many times, and I just wanted to write about it. And I also wanted to weave in this like murder mystery. I don't know. I just was like, I'm just going to do a whole bunch of shit here. And I want people to figure it out and take their own meaning from it. So I would say like, but both of those were just continuing momentum from what I had done on Doom 2 and 3, or and when this is 3, where I was like, I'm not done with these ideas and these concepts. I'm going to continue going. I think sometimes albums are like kind of like in pairs or in threes, before a band kind of like transitions a little bit into their next phase. You talk about like Jurgen Munkby, for example. Think about like the Black Jazz period, right? It's like Black Jazz, 111, and then International Black Jazz Society are kind of like a trilogy in a way. They go from like more extreme, kind of like industrial, kind of some like black metal and Nine Inch Nails type aspects, to like a more streamlined, almost like Motorheady type thing. And so the point here that I'm trying to make, perhaps in a convoluted way, is that like I feel that they're kind of those. There's like a batch there. So where to now? So I have an EP that's instrumentally done and almost done with vocal tracking, and the single will come out around March 15th on a compilation by Euphoriatic Records. Very, very small upcoming label. It's going to be like a, well, I don't want to, I'm not supposed to say, but it's going to be cool. And I have that single marks a transition away from what I did on Doom 2 and the Collapse. And to tease that a little bit, I've slowed it down further. So the single is like 35 BPM. It is very atmospheric, and I mixed it up vocally a little bit. So that doing that single, which was opportunistic because I was asked to contribute to the comp, and I was like, all right, let me write something and let me kind of like let my guard down a little bit and write whatever the hell I want. And that single worked, and I was like, ooh, all right, I should do another song. So there's 2 songs, then like a little acoustic vignette at the end. That full EP I would like to release this year, but I'm not in any rush. I feel like maybe like fall, maybe something like that. And then the Witnesses 5, if you will, is kind of like I'm trying to be as ambitious as possible. From a film perspective, one of my idols is Andrei Tarkovsky, and I want to write a work that's a tribute to him, particularly Solaris, Stalker, The Sacrifice, Andrei Rublev. And I want to write pieces that are inspired by those films in particular. But this has to be good. Like it would be an embarrassment to me to like put this thing out and invoke that name and then have it be not great. So I'm really going to take my time with that. So we'll see. Maybe that's 2023. And then I still have this itch to scratch, building on what I did in Poltergeist 1. I want to do Poltergeist 2 and then kind of repackage it as 2 EPs that you can get at once. Because we didn't talk too much about Poltergeist 1, which is all good. But Timber Timbre is like a band that I really, really love. And I'm thinking more of like the self-titled album. They've gone in like a pretty like weird, like loungy, creepy Nick Cave type direction recently, which I like. But there's something they did like I don't see myself ever doing something that sounds like the Handsome Family or something, but I want to use acoustic guitar to create something very, very sparse and bleak. And so that is something I still have to figure out. I've tried, but it hasn't clicked yet to write those songs, but it'll happen. I'm not giving up. So like the next calendar year, like an EP and just a lot of work going into the follow-up to 4 is what I'll be focused on.
Nice. Wow. That's a lot. We unpacked a lot of stuff today. I will ask you a very quick wild card final question. I like to ask these wild card questions on the way out. Foreign art, if somebody happens upon this interview or happens upon your music, even better, and they see how you did it, what advice would you impart to somebody who wants to be the next Greg or the next Witnesses? Like, I want to have my own solo project. What's a key piece of advice or the first thing that they should do, or what can you, advise, if anything?
Wow. Gosh. Because I can think of a lot of things, but I'm trying to think of like that one key piece of advice. Um, I think the thing that I would say, yeah, I know what I would say foremost. If you like what I do, it's just you have to be comfortable making mistakes and persisting. I have mixed and mastered. I mentioned this earlier. I have made a ton of mistakes mixing and mastering. I won't say where they are, but you listen close enough, you can probably find them. And you just have to keep going. You have to be a student. You have to learn. You have to listen. You have to find the right voices. There's a lot of snake oil out there. You have to figure out who to listen to, and you have to take risks. And then from a compositional perspective, you're going to make mistakes as well. You like if you were to say to yourself, man, all I've done is like write these like Black Sabbath riffs all my life, and I want to write something that sounds like PJ Harvey. Like it might sound like shit like the first time. There was a guy who was talking about, I can't remember who it was. I can't remember if it was a director or a writer who was like, you have a backlog of terrible stuff that you have to get out first. And so that can be daunting, right? Because you can be like, oh man, like I had this vision in my head and I missed. It sounds goofy. You have to keep going. Like that, and that takes sometimes a stupid level of confidence or carefreeness. And you have to be prepared that like people are gonna listen to me like, what the hell are you doing? Like I don't get it. You just have to kind of, like, it sounds cheesy, but you kind of have to like believe in yourself, kind of, or just like be carefree enough to make those mistakes.
Hmm. Wise words from Greg Schwan of Witnesses. Man, this has been an absolute pleasure. I'm
Same.
sorry that I hope I didn't take you away from your evening too badly, but thank you so much for hanging out with me and our Ghost Cult viewers. And I'm super excited about whatever's coming next. And I urge everybody to get out there and get that Witnesses 4 on vinyl, especially it's definitely a unique prospect. It's definitely unique music for an acquired taste, but definitely rewarding if you go spend the time. So I'm rooting for you, man. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Don't please don't apologize for taking my night. This is amazing. It's you get nowhere without support and help. And so I appreciate you taking an interest in the project and having me on.